paramedics were dispatched to a home in Springfield, Illinois on December the 18th of 2022 after police requested medical assistance for a 911 caller who was suffering hallucinations due to alcohol withdrawal. After arriving on the scene, 44-year-old Peggy Finley entered the rear bedroom, where officers briefed her on the patient, Earl Moore. Despite the latter's condition, Finley immediately adopted an agitated tone with him saying, "You're gonna have to walk, 'cause we ain't carrying you," before muttering, "I am seriously not in the mood for this." 2 officers helped Moore out of the house and onto a gurney. Finley and her colleague, 50-year-old Peter Cadigan, strapped the patient onto the stretcher in a prone position before loading him into the ambulance. Upon their arrival at the hospital, Moore was pronounced dead. The autopsy revealed that his death was caused by compressional and positional asphyxia due to prone, face-down restraint on a stretcher by tightened straps across the back and lower body in the setting of lethargy and underlying chronic alcoholism. On January the 9th of 2023, Finley and Cadigan were arrested and charged with first-degree murder for their careless treatment of Moore, which ultimately proved deadly. As of the latest developments, the medics were being held at the Sangamon County Detention Facility on a $1 million bond each. Number 8. Manochika Daniels. In the early morning hours of December the 17th of 2019, the police in Lauderhill, Florida were called to the parking lot of a local gentleman's club where a toddler was seen wandering around in tears. Officers found the child, who led them to a vehicle that wasn't running and had the rear window cracked open for ventilation. Roughly 30 minutes later, 23-year-old Manochika Daniels exited Vegas Cabaret, where she worked as an exotic dancer, and identified herself to police as the abandoned child's mother. Daniels had reportedly left her 3-year-old daughter in the car at about 11 p.m. the previous night, at which point she went inside the club to begin her shift. For the careless parenting decision, which left her daughter alone and unattended for multiple hours, the young woman was arrested on a charge of child neglect. In the immediate aftermath of her arrest, her daughter was taken into protective custody. 2 years later, Daniels was arrested again after her child told the Florida Department of Children and Families that she'd been physically abused by her mother. According to the young girl's testimony, Daniels had struck her with a hairdryer cord several times because she was acting bad and not listening. Following her second arrest, Daniels faced a first-degree felony charge of child abuse with great bodily harm or torture and a second-degree felony charge of child neglect. Number 7. Francisco Javier Lopez Martinez, a night shift cleaning lady at Dwight Morrow High School in Englewood, New Jersey, discovered a suspicious electronic device in the girls' bathroom and brought it to the police on January the 31st of 2019. The device was determined to be a hidden camera which had footage of the cleaner using the bathroom, as well as a clip of her boss, head custodian Francisco Javier Lopez Martinez, installing it. When the 59-year-old man learned that local authorities had been made aware of his actions, he fled from his Bergenfield home. The police later tracked him down to the high school campus where he was hiding, refusing to surrender. The school grounds were sealed off and a law enforcement team that included a canine unit conducted a thorough search of the building. Lopez Martinez was finally located in the early hours of February the 1st. An officer wrestled away a handgun he had in his possession and placed him in handcuffs. The weapon was later determined to be an airsoft gun that resembled a large caliber firearm. Lopez Martinez was charged with third-degree invasion of privacy, burglary, possession of a weapon for unlawful use, illegal possession of a handgun on school grounds, hindering apprehension, obstruction of justice, and resisting arrest by flight. Number 6. Tashina Majors. A corrections officer at Northern State Prison in Newark, New Jersey was arrested in December of 2020 for having a year-long affair with a male inmate. According to the state's Attorney General's office, 42-year-old Tashina Majors had repeated intercourse with a prisoner over whom she had supervisory or disciplinary power by virtue of her status as a senior correctional police officer. Law enforcement moved in on Majors following a joint investigation by the Attorney General's Office of Public Integrity and Accountability and Corrections Department's Special Investigations Division. She was charged with second-degree assault, which can carry a sentence of 5 to 10 years in state prison, as well as a fine of up to $150,000. As of the latest updates, the case's legal proceedings hadn't yet reached a conclusion. Number 5. Laura Campbell and Derek Miller. In 2017, Oklahoma authorities began investigating accusations that local postal workers were stealing drugs being sent through the mail. By September, investigators had identified 3 suspects, including postal employees Laura Campbell and Derek Miller, as well as the former's husband, David Waters. Subsequent reports revealed that Campbell was a supervisor at the mail processing plant in Tulsa, where Miller also worked. The police conducted surveillance of the co-conspirators, whom they observed separating certain packages from the rest of the mail. The targeted parcels, which Campbell and Miller suspected of containing various drugs, would be taken to the former's office, where they'd remove the substances and take them to their cars. A raid of Campbell and Waters' home near Teawa uncovered 13 pounds of marijuana, a half pound of cocaine, 304 ecstasy tablets, and 152 hydrocodone pills, along with meth and 5 guns. At Miller's house, officers seized 25 pounds of marijuana and cash. He was arrested for trafficking, while his co-worker and her husband were booked on 11 counts each. In the end, Miller admitted to swiping drugs from packages since 2015 and was given a suspended jail sentence plus probation. Campbell reached a plea deal with prosecutors and was ultimately sentenced to 5 months in prison. Number 4. Jan Della Petolantino. On the evening of August the 11th of 2022, Ohio police were called to BJ's Restaurant and Brew House in Springdale for a report of an injured male on the premises. Upon arrival, officers found the victim, a restaurant employee named Paris Dismukes, in critical condition after reportedly being stabbed by a co-worker. Dismukes was rushed to the hospital, where he was ultimately pronounced dead. The police arrested another restaurant worker, 18-year-old Jan Della Petolantino, at the scene. He was booked at the Hamilton County Justice Center and held without bond on charges of murder and drug possession. Court records indicated that 32-year-old Dismukes and Tolentino had been working a shift together that night when the latter suddenly attacked the victim, stabbing him multiple times in the neck. When asked to provide a reason for his violent outburst, Tolentino allegedly told investigators he'd targeted Dismukes because a witch told him that the other man was going to shoot him in the head with a gun. In October, Tolentino was declared incompetent to stand trial following a medical evaluation. He was ordered to undergo up to a year of treatment at Summit Behavioral Health Care before his competence would be re-evaluated. Number 3. Madison Howard. In January of 2020, the Atascosa County Sheriff's Office in Texas released a statement detailing how corrections officers had discovered methamphetamine in a jail cell, prompting an investigation. Within a week, narcotics investigators had identified a suspect in the case, 19-year-old Madison Howard, who'd only been working as a correction officer for less than 2 months, had allegedly sold the illegal substance to an inmate at the jail. Surveillance footage showed Howard take the drugs directly to the unnamed inmate, who in turn gave her payment. The young woman was taken into custody, whereupon she was charged with possessing a prohibited substance in a correctional facility and possession of a controlled substance with intent to deliver. She was terminated from her position immediately following her arrest. Today's topic was requested by Ali Labar. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Patrick Ferguson. Tennessee man Robert Howard was reported missing by his girlfriend on January the 6th of 2021, having last been seen the previous day at his home in Memphis. The resulting investigation led to the discovery that 30-year-old Howard had been kidnapped and murdered by a Memphis police officer named Patrick Ferguson. According to an arrest affidavit, 29-year-old Ferguson had driven to the victim's home, abducted him at gunpoint, and after driving him about a third of a mile away, gunned him down in the back of his squad car. Investigators uncovered damning internet searches Ferguson had made in relation to cleaning up crime scenes and destroying DNA evidence. The police reviewed surveillance footage, which confirmed that the fatal shooting had occurred while the officer was on duty. Ferguson was relieved of duty and taken into custody on charges of first-degree murder in perpetration of aggravated kidnapping, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with or fabricating evidence. A second suspect, identified as 28-year-old Joshua Rogers, was also arrested for allegedly helping Ferguson relocate the victim's body after the shooting. It later emerged that Howard's violent killing had been the culmination of a feud between him and Ferguson, stemming from his relationship with the officer's ex-girlfriend. Before we continue with number 1, be sure to stay tuned after if you haven't seen our earlier release about when dangerous jobs go wrong yet. Number 1. David Fuller. In 1987, a pair of young women were stalked, assaulted, and killed in separate attacks that occurred in Tunbridge Wells, an affluent town about 30 miles southeast of central London. The victims were identified as 25-year-old Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce, aged 20. The killer remained unidentified for more than 3 decades. Then, in December of 2020, modern DNA technology allowed law enforcement to finally zero in on a suspect, David Fuller, who by that time was in his late 60s, subsequently had his East Sussex residence raided by the police. In the man's home, officers recovered hard drives full of footage in which he was shown abusing dead women's bodies in a mortuary. Fuller was reportedly employed as a hospital electrician, a position that granted him easy access to the morgue sections of 2 hospitals in Tunbridge Wells. Investigators determined that between 2008 and 2020, Fuller had systematically and repeatedly defiled upwards of 102 female corpses. Although there was no CCTV footage of the attacks, the man took his own videos and photographs of the heinous acts, which he would view after the fact. In 2022, Fuller pleaded guilty to the 1987 murders as well as the corpse abuse. Judge Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb told him he would spend the rest of his mortal life behind bars, as she handed down a whole life prison term as punishment for his various crimes. As Fuller was led out of the courtroom, there was a shout of "scum" from the public gallery. Family members of Fuller's victims were awarded compensation of up to £32,000 for psychiatric trauma and any financial losses caused by his actions. Number 8. Natalie Corona. On January the 10th of 2019, 22-year-old Californian police officer Natalie Corona was responding to a 3-car crash in Davis. It was, as Police Chief Darren Pytel would later call it, a routine traffic collision. That is, until a man on a bike, who had nothing to do with the car crash, rode up and started shooting. He hit Corona, who had only been on the job for a few weeks, once, causing her to fall to the ground. After she did, the man unloaded an entire magazine on her before reloading and starting to fire at bystanders. He hit an attending firefighter in the boot, hit a backpack, narrowly missing another bystander, and then took off again. According to his roommate, whom he ran into on his way inside the house, the shooter was acting completely normal. Luckily for the police, the shooter had left behind his backpack at the scene, and they quickly had the suspect identified and surrounded. The killer was 48-year-old Kevin Limbaugh. After a short but intense standoff during which Limbaugh exited and re-entered his house a few times, Limbaugh eventually shot himself. He had left behind a note that read, "The Davis Police Department has been hitting me with ultrasonic waves meant to keep dogs from barking. I notified the press, Internal Affairs, and even the FBI about it. I am highly sensitive to its effect on my inner ear. I did my best to appease them, but they have continued for years, and I can't live this way anymore." Number 7. Ashley Gwendon. 28-year-old Ashley Gwendon, a Marine Corps reservist, was fatally shot during her first day as a member of the Prince William County Police Department in Virginia. After being sworn in as a police officer on February the 26th of 2016, Gwendon's first shift was scheduled for the following day. At around 5:30 p.m. during her inaugural day on the job, Gwendon and 2 other officers responded to reports of a domestic dispute in the town of Woodbridge. When they arrived at the scene, Army Staff Sergeant Ronald Hamilton, aged 32, refused to let them come inside the residence. The officers insisted on performing a welfare check on Hamilton's wife, Crystal, who had been the one to place the 911 call in the first place. Officer David McEwen attempted to force his way into the home, at which point Hamilton grabbed an assault rifle and began firing indiscriminately at the officers, hitting all 3 of them in the process. One of the wounded policemen managed to successfully call for backup, but law enforcement personnel were unable to apprehend Hamilton before he shot and killed his wife. Officer Gwendon ultimately passed away from her gunshot wounds as well. The injuries suffered by the 2 additional officers at the scene were not life-threatening. Hamilton was arrested and charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder. After being spared the death sentence, he was formally sentenced to 7 consecutive life terms in March of 2019. Number 6. Jesus Olvera Aguilar. A 19-year-old roofer was fatally struck by lightning in Lakewood Ranch, Florida, on September the 7th of 2021. Jesus Olvera Aguilar and his brother were working atop the Walk Apartments when the incident occurred. The victim's brother heard a loud bang accompanied by a sudden flash of light when the lightning bolt hit the roof at around 2:50 p.m. He turned to find that his brother was unconscious and had stopped breathing. Neighbors performed CPR on Olvera Aguilar while they waited the arrival of paramedics. First responders ultimately pronounced the teenage roofer dead at the scene. The fatal accident prompted an investigation by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. It was reported that the Manatee County Sheriff's Office was treating Olvera Aguilar's death as an accident, and that all evidence confirmed it to have occurred due to the lightning that struck the roof that afternoon. According to officials in the industry, roofers make up at least 15% of all lightning-related deaths in Florida each year. Number 5. Sean DeMoink. On July the 4th of 2021, a volunteer for the Penguin Overbrook Hills Fire Company was tragically killed in the line of duty. It was meant to be the last day on the job for 35-year-old Sean DeMoink. He and his wife, Melissa Richard Greenblatt, had planned to move back to the firefighters' home country of Canada the following week. DeMoink was packing for their upcoming move when he was summoned into work due to a reported fire in Wynwood at around 10:30 p.m. Roughly 30 minutes later, a mayday call went out to the rest of DeMoink's department. The volunteer fireman was found unconscious on the 3rd floor of the burning building to which he had responded. He was taken to Lankenau Hospital but ultimately died from the injuries he'd sustained in the blaze. Firefighters from all across the region attended DeMoink's memorial service on July the 10th, in the course of which the fallen firefighter was laid to rest in Lower Merion Township. Number 4. Ashley Diaz. A crossing guard at Stanley Middle School in Lafayette, California, died after stepping in front of a moving vehicle to save a young girl walking across the street. Ashley Diaz, aged 45, was a San Francisco resident who, as a child, attended the school for which he was now employed. He was on the job in the after-school hours of September the 8th of 2021 and noticed an SUV traveling rapidly towards the crosswalk near the school's premises. The driver failed to slow down despite the fact that there was a student using the crosswalk at the time. As a frontal collision with the little girl became imminent, the crossing guard pushed her out of the way and placed himself in the path of the oncoming car. He thus took the full force of the impact. An unresponsive Diaz was pulled out from underneath the SUV and CPR was administered by witnesses. Lafayette police soon arrived at the scene and the victim was transported to John Muir Medical Center in Walnut Creek, where he would later pass away. A small makeshift memorial was created by students and faculty members near the crosswalk where the accident had occurred, honoring Diaz and the sacrifice he made. Number 3. Jordan Romero and Carlos Gutierrez. A pair of construction workers were killed in Boston, Massachusetts, on February the 24th of 2021 after being hit by a dump truck. 27-year-old Jordan Romero and Carlos Gutierrez, aged 33, were working on a construction site in Boston's financial district when the fatal incident took place. As the dump truck struck the two men, it caused them to fall directly into a 9-foot deep hole in the ground. They were subsequently trapped in the hole until a witness contacted 911 and emergency crews were dispatched to the site. A crane was brought in to lift up the truck which had gotten stuck at the opening of the hole. The technical rescue crew feared that simply backing the truck up might cause the above structure to cave in on the two victims. Once the men were successfully extricated from the trench, they were both pronounced dead by first responders at the scene. Romero's family described him as a hard-working man who was trying to save up enough money to bring his family to the United States from El Salvador. He and Gutierrez worked for Atlantic Coast Utilities, a Wayland-based contractor that had a long history of ignoring the safety and health of its employees. According to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, Atlantic Coast faced fines of $1.3 million based on an estimated total of 28 safety violations in connection with the incident. Today's topic was requested by Captain MI5 and Magic Pyro Ninja. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Rolf Lansendorfer. A sightseeing plane crashed near the Misty Fjords National Monument in Ketchikan, Alaska on August 5th of 2021, killing the pilot and all 5 passengers. The aircraft was being piloted by 64-year-old Rolf Lansendorfer of Cle Elum, Washington. The passengers on board were all vacationing on a Holland America Line cruise ship called the MS New Amsterdam. Ketchikan is a popular port for cruise ships, and the sightseeing plane ride was just part of their excursion while visiting Alaska. The flight through the Misty Fjords gives tourists a view of the glacier valleys and snow-capped mountain peaks in the area. Lansendorfer crashed the plane at around 11:20 that morning, at which point the aircraft's emergency beacon was automatically activated. Search helicopters spotted the wrecked plane around 2:40 p.m., but the bodies of the victims couldn't be recovered immediately due to inclement weather and limited visibility. According to an investigation conducted by the National Transportation Safety Board, the pilot had crashed into a tree while the plane was traveling through an area with low-hanging clouds. Lansendorfer had been involved in another plane crash less than a month prior to his deadly accident. On July the 9th, an aircraft he was piloting flipped and landed upside down in the water after hitting a buoy shortly after takeoff. He was the only one on board the plane, and he'd suffered no injuries in that particular incident. Number 1. Upper Big Branch Mine Disaster. At roughly 3:30 p.m. on April the 5th of 2010, a coal dust explosion at the Upper Big Branch South Mine in Raleigh County, West Virginia, resulted in the deaths of 29 miners working at the site. There were dangerously high levels of methane gas present within the mines, an aspect that greatly contributed to the eruption of the deadly blast. The mine was being operated by a subsidiary of Massey Energy, a coal extractor that worked primarily in the Appalachian region of the United States. Massey would later be found guilty of ignoring crucial safety standards that had allowed for the development of the dangerous conditions that ultimately led to the disaster. The ventilation systems being utilized in the Upper Big Branch mine hadn't undergone proper maintenance work in the days and weeks leading up to the incident, which in turn precipitated the high levels of methane that caused the explosion. Emergency response teams from multiple surrounding counties were dispatched to the mines in an attempt to find and rescue any of the miners who might have survived the initial blast. The search was repeatedly delayed due to dangerously high levels of methane and carbon monoxide in the mine. It was determined that at least 25 of the workers were deceased as the rescue mission went underway, while 4 individuals remained missing. Within a few days, the 4 bodies previously unaccounted for were found, officially bringing the death toll to 29 people. There had been a total of 31 miners on site at the time of the explosion. The 2 survivors were evacuated early on in the rescue efforts. Massey Energy was fined $10.8 million based on a total of 369 safety citations. Former Massey CEO Don Blankenship was convicted of conspiring to willfully violate safety standards and was imprisoned for 1 year. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be forced into a profession that you're extremely bad at, or only eat your least favorite foods? Let us know in the comments section below.